Hey, so good morning and welcome. This is actually week 5. I don't know how I miscounted, but somehow I was confused. And your announcements are the different weeks are I somehow I don't know. But this is week 5. So we have this week and next week. So again, like I was a little off and I apologize for that. But the classes actually end next Thursday. The 18th is the last day for classes and so I will have to be submitting your grades by, I'm pulling up my calendar, by Friday. So everything's going to close on the 18th. So make sure that you have everything submitted by then. Even if you have some late assignments, you can still get partial credit. So please make sure that you are paying attention to deadlines and submitting all of your stuff. Okay, so this week we are going to be talking about, we're going to continue on with interviewing. And I'm going to assign your elevator pitch presentation. That is going to be something that you are going to record and then send to me. Now, please do not read it. And it's very obvious if you're reading it. Do not write out an elevator pitch and then be like, "Hi, my name is Megan Morrow, and I am a freshman at Florida Southern. I am studying." See how it's don't do that because you're not going to have that with you when you are actually networking. You're not going to have that with you when you meet people in the wild or anything like that. I'm trying to close all this stuff out. I'm not good with technology. So you're not going to have any of that. So you don't want to practice that way. You need to practice how you plan to perform because how you practice is how you are going to perform. So I mean, practice it. It should flow. You're talking about yourself. So you know you. You don't need a script to read. There's no right or wrong way. You're not going to, forget something and then be like, oh, I just blew it. I messed it all up. It's okay because it's a conversation. So please don't put too much effort, or God bless, put effort into it. Please don't stress out about it. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Let's call it a Monday. I was on vacation all last week, so I'm kind of like just getting back into work brain. So we're gonna blame it on that. I did get a great chance to go to see my son. I was down in Texas. I was in Waco, Austin, and then San Angelo. I got to see him graduate, and then he is back. So I got boots in the house. If anybody's military, then you understand that saying boots in the house means that my son is home for a few days before he has to ship back out again, and he will report to Yuma, Arizona. Apparently, there's nothing out there. It's a big desert, but he is super excited because he found out he's only an hour and a half from Vegas. So I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. So hopefully he makes good choices. All right. So last week we did interviewing skills. I know that was a longer video, but that was really good stuff for before, during, and after an interview. Hopefully you guys watched it and you got some good information from it. It's one of my favorite presentations to do in during like in this class, especially when we're in person, because it's gold. It's things that might sound like common sense, but unless you've been there and done that, and like in the fall when I teach first years, a lot of them have never been on a professional interview before. If you're an adult student, you've had plenty of these interviews before. So probably that was all, repeated information. So hopefully it was just a good refresher for you. Just things to think about, like, you just don't think about it until you've been there or maybe had that experience or, like with me. Like I was telling you about, like when I interviewed for this position and I was like lost and I was driving all over campus. Well, that was a hard lesson for me to learn, but now I will know for certain, like I need to know where I'm going. I need to be much better prepared and not just plan on going on my stored memories. Like, oh yeah, I know where I'm going, like that muscle memory thing. Make sure that you do know where you are going and so I hope you got some good information about that. I assigned the internship research. And remember that's three different sources. So please don't submit anything with using LinkedIn more than once or Handshake or ZipRecruiter or whatever job board or whatever resource you're going to use. If you submit a job or an internship posting from the same resource, you're only going to get that counted as one, and you will lose points. So please make sure it's 10 different sources. Also, the internship policy acknowledgement I also assigned last week, and that is just for you saying, yes, I understand I have to have an internship. And then the elevator pitch written. So please make sure that you get that submitted as well. And that is open until Wednesday for full credits because, like I said, I was out. If you had any questions, please let me know before Wednesday because I will not be granting any extensions. Yes, I know I was out, but I did check my email over the weekend and I'm here right now. So please make sure that you're getting on top of that. All right. So next we're going to continue on with with interviewing and we're going to break down some of the top interview questions that you can pretty much be guaranteed that you're going to be asked. So how do you answer those? Okay. So we're going to dive in. The very first one, and if you probably haven't guessed, again, if you have been on um, professional interviews before, you're probably know exactly what the first question is going to be. And that is going to be, tell me about yourself. Now, this is a great question because they're looking kind of for something a little bit specific when they ask you this. So you're in a job interview, you're not in a social setting. So it's not like, oh, well, I'm the youngest of five. I grew up in the country. I did this. My family moved around. I da 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 da. Now, unless that's relevant to the job you're applying for, that stuff does not need to be included in the tell me about yourself question. Um, what you need to do is I had to pause. So what you need to do is like think about your past experience as it is relevant to the job you're applying for. So the tell me about yourself question is truly the oldest interview question. They want to know about your background and how you got started in your career. So think about this. When last week's video, we talked about the before, during, and after the interview, about how you check in and, you're going to smile and you're going to, have a nice, firm, strong handshake and you're going to use eye contact. You're going to thank them for taking the time to meet with you. That's all part of the interview as well. They're going to maybe do a little bit of small talk. Every interviewer is different, but if it's a Monday, they might be like, so how was your weekend? Or, if it's a Friday, do you have any plans for the weekend? Or if we've had some bad weather, maybe we're in hurricane season or anything like that. There might be a little bit of small talk, little chit chat. And then once you get started, once you get settled and everybody's kind of ready to get going, they're going to be like, okay, so, and they're going to have like, your resume right here in front of them. All right, Megan, so, tell me a little bit about yourself. Again, oldest interview question in the book. If you don't get asked this question, then either you have an inexperienced interviewer, maybe they're having a bad day or something like that. It doesn't excuse it, but I'm saying like, they're not going to bypass this question. All right. So a good framework to kind of stick with is one, remember, we're talking about your career. We're not really talking about anything prior to that unless it's relevant. All right. So how you got started, what you like about it, and then where you see yourself going. It's important that you practice. This is going to be the first question that they're going to ask you. You don't want to come across as like all stumbly and like, oh God, tell me, and then you end up kind of fumbling. This is going to really kind of set the tone, set the scene for the rest of the interview. Okay, so practice so that you gain your confidence. I've said this before. Remember, if it's repeated, it's important. Confidence is the number one skill you can master in order to be successful. So how are you going to create your answer? All right. You want to tell your interviewer how you got started in your profession and when you first realized you were interested in whatever it is you do. And if you're not sure, just think back to what major, what's your major? Why did you pick that? What is it about that has got you excited? When did you realize that, hey, I want to go for accounting. I want to go for finance. I want to go for horticulture. Like, when did this kind of passion begin? My degree is in psychology. I didn't even realize that I loved psychology until I took an elective in college in my undergrad because I just needed electives. And I took an intro to psych class and I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. And I was like, oh my God, I love this. And that's where my passion started to fuel for this was taking an elective. I've always been a people person. I've always been someone that everybody comes to with their problems. I swear I have like the counselor is in like tattooed on my forehead. People will like in the grocery store, at the tire place. I mean, people will literally just tell me their entire life story. And I'm like, I didn't ask, but they do. They just kind of they verbal vomit all over me. I just have that about me apparently. But people like feel comfortable. I guess I am high in relatability, which is a good thing. But sometimes I'm like, I'm not a counselor. You're not paying me for this. Like, I just want to get my tires fixed, or I just want to get my oil changed, and I have the people. But so again, think about so when I start to think about like my journey, I can think about like, well, I would probably include that. I've always been somebody that people have gone to. I took a class, I found out I loved it, and then I continued on with my education. Okay. And I would formulate. So when did you first realize that you loved this or that you're going to get started in this as a profession? Then you want to talk about what you did to nurture that desire and what fueled that passion. This could literally be anything. So maybe you're going for accounting and you're like, you know, I've always been good with numbers. It just makes sense to me. I really like balancing stuff. I like, maybe you're really high in attention to detail. Maybe it was like, oh yeah, back in, second grade, we'd always do like these math games. I was always winning. And I realized I'm really good at this. So I took more math classes. I took some, accelerated classes. We didn't have like AP and stuff like that back in my day. We just had honors and regular. Uh, and so maybe you took some, honors classes or AP, depending on where you are generationally. I don't know everybody's story. So what did you do to fuel that passion? Again, it could be anything. Maybe you're an international student and you've come over here to specifically go to Florida Southern. Why? What brought you that? What did you do to fuel this passion? All right, next you want to mention where you're going to school while touching on one or two relevant highlights or things that you have learned. All right, this is especially important for some of our younger students, or if you are getting if you're graduating and you'll be getting like maybe one of your first degree, first jobs. So this is kind of important there. All right, you also kind of want to gloss over maybe two key jobs or internships if you haven't had anything like that. You're a younger student, you haven't had a professional job yet. Maybe it was a part-time job that you had during high school or a summer job. That'll work too. You can mention relevant key accomplishments, things that you have learned along the way. If you don't have any job experience, think about a club or a sport or some type of organization or maybe volunteer or a class project. You can think about things like that you can talk about basically things that you have learned. But again, keep it relevant to the job you're applying for, to the industry, to your career goals. And you want to wrap that up with what you like about your profession and where you see yourself heading. You can even tie that into the position you are applying for. All right, so some helpful tips. Who is interviewing you? Do your research. You should know. Don't just blindly accept, oh, yeah, you're going to come in for 10 o'clock with an interview. Okay, with who? Look that person up. See if you can find a way to integrate anything about them. We talked about that in the last video about making a connection. This is the same thing that you're doing now that you're in the interview process and you're actually answering the questions. See if there's something that you and this interviewer might have in common. You want to answer the question in a way that shows that you helped maybe the person in a previous situation. That way you can take, this is what I'm talking about. When you know this person, you can figure out what their problem is, what they're struggling with. See if you can show them, again, you're making yourself the obvious choice. They have a problem, you are the solution. And this is how you do it. Hey, I know that you have this problem and I've already solved it in a previous situation. That way they can see the value that you bring. Okay. All right. So that is how you're going to answer the tell me about yourself question. That's going to be hands down the first question they're probably going to ask you. It is one of the oldest questions in the interview handbook, whoever wrote it and whoever they are, but they're going to ask you that. Now, some other questions that you can be guaranteed to ask, they are going to ask, what do you consider to be your greatest strength? This is a perfect opportunity for you to really shine in your strengths and the value that you're going to bring to this team that you're applying for, this position, this company, this recruiter, hiring manager, whoever. Remember, you're trying to show them the value. You're trying to make yourself be the obvious choice. So, the way that you can answer this, which is really going to blow their mind and it's going to be just phenomenal, is it has to tie back to the job description. So go back and look at that job description. What are the key, qualifications or requirements or competencies, anything like that, that's saying that this is the prime candidate is going to have these things. And when you look at that, go through that with a fine-tooth comb. If it's repeated, it's important. And ask yourself, do I possess any of these skills? And hopefully you do. That's why you're applying for the position. Look, I would have two, maybe even three skills or strengths that you can talk about and just have it kind of in your back pocket, but make sure you definitely have one. But the last thing you want is for you to answer this really great question that go, oh, that's really wonderful. What else? And then you're like, I only prepared for one. Be over prepared. Okay. So I would have two or three strengths that I pulled from the job description. So if it's talking about the prime candidate, it's going to have presentation skills, interpersonal communication, ability to connect well with people. Maybe it's attention to detail or to good time management, or it doesn't matter what it says on there. What are some of the things that they are looking for in their prime candidate? So think back to that assignment that I gave you 2 weeks ago, the telling your story, where I had you come up with 10 tasks, 10 skills, 10 stories. This is where this can come into play. Not only will you have it already written out so that you can copy and paste it and put it into your cover letter so that you're not constantly rewriting an entire full cover letter for every position you apply for, but you can also use this as your stories. Stories are impactful. Facts, stuff like that. Yes, that gets the point across, but stories leave an impression. So you want to be able to tell a story. So if they're talking about, maybe I'm going to talk about leadership. That's one of my greatest strengths. But make sure that it's on the job description. If I'm talking about, I have really great leadership, skills, but nowhere in this position, it require me to have leadership skills, then I should not talk about it. Now, I can't imagine any job that would not value leadership skills. Same with communication. Those are the two things that, I mean, really, truly doesn't even matter if you are in a position of leadership where people like actually report to you and you're responsible for employees, but you can always demonstrate leadership skills. But again, to err on the side of caution, look at the job description and pick stuff from there. So if they're talking about, I'm going to say, must have good presentation skills. Well, I've been an educator for 25 years, so it's easy for me to be like, oh, that's one of my greatest strengths. I possess really strong presentation skills. And I'm going to tell a very brief but impactful, punchy story about when I demonstrated great presentation skills. Be specific. I don't want to just be like, oh, yes, I possess really great presentation skills. They need more. They're going to try to get more from you, but don't make them pull information from you. Say, I possess really great presentation skills. When I was teaching professional development at Florida Southern College, and now let me give a brief, specific story. I don't want to just say, I have great presentation skills. I've been an educator for 25 years. I've been presenting a lot. Again, that's not enough. When you guys did your mock interview, a lot of the feedback that you guys said from big interview was that your answers were not long enough. That you need to give more detail. You need to give more substance. Don't drone on and on and on. I would say your answers to interview questions should be around a minute and a half, maybe no, minute 45, no more than 2 minutes. Um, Unless it's a tell me about yourself question, which we're going to talk about in a minute, where you're actually, as a behavioral question, and we're going to talk about how you answer that one. But for the majority of these, you want to give enough where you have enticed your interviewer, you have captured their attention, you've given enough detail so that they get a clear picture, but you're not droning on and boring them. So you have to get good at reading the room. You have to get good at like watching people's facial expressions and seeing, are they bored? Are they looking at their watch? Are they, all right, they're taking notes? All right, come on, they shuffling around. Like, they're looking at you and they're nodding and they're leaning in and they're engaging, like we talked about in the last video. That's a good way to show that you're actually engaged and excited, is like, leaning in and nodding and that active listening. If they're doing the same thing and taking notes, that's you're great. But once you feel like you've started to lose them, you need to wrap up your answer. So go back to the job description, pick 2 or 3 skills, because again, they might be like, oh, that's really great. Glad to hear it. We need someone with good presentation skills. What else do you have going on? Or, if they say, oh, can you please elaborate on that? Again, that's why you want to have the stories, and be able to give, rich detail, but have at least 2 or 3 strengths that you can lean on from the job description or from the industry or the company or the person, make it relevant and specific to the job you're applying for. Now, right after that, they're going to say, interesting, or that's great to hear, or whatever they say. So, what would you consider to be one of your biggest weaknesses? Now, you're applying for a job. You're trying to make yourself the obvious choice. You're trying to be the best candidate. So why in the world would I talk about the things that I struggle with? I need to put my best foot forward. I need to have, be like, the best candidate. But here's the thing. We all have weaknesses. We all do. To say you don't have a weakness, first of all, is just not true. And then you sound pompous and like, who wants to work with someone who thinks that they're all that in a bag of chips? Salt and vinegar, extra crispy. No, like you are a person. You are not relatable at all if you're up here on your high ivory tower being like, oh, no, no, I'm perfect. I don't have any flaws. I don't have any weaknesses. But so you have to have something, you have to be able to answer this question. You can't say, I don't have any, or I can't think of any. You need to be prepared. So you can answer this one of 2 ways. You can pick something that maybe was a weakness for you, but you're working on it, but make sure it's not vital to the job that you're applying for. So, for example, like if you're going for customer service, and they're like, so what do you consider to be your greatest weakness? And you're like, dude, I hate people. I just want to throat punch them all day long. That is not a good way to answer that. Even if you do, and if you do, maybe you shouldn't go into customer service. But, being relatable to people is vital for customer service. Same with like if you're going for accounting and you're like, oh, I don't really do well with numbers, that math, not a good idea to talk about that being a weakness because that's vital to the job. So think about something that's not vital to the job, but something that you have worked on and so that you're kind of overcoming it. So you could say, well, I used to really struggle with time management. And then how did you overcome it? I had this fabulous professor for professional development, but I missed a couple deadlines for our assignments and I got, only half credit. And then I had to work really hard to bring my grade back up after having missed those assignments. And I learned that lesson real quick. So now instead of just depending on my memory, to when things are due, I write everything down. I create alarms on my phone. I create calendar reminders so that I'm never late or I don't miss any more assignments. Or maybe you struggle with punctuality. Again, gotta be careful with that one because you don't want your employer to think that you're going to be late all the time. But again, if you turn it into a strength, like I used to struggle with being on time, but I was late to a meeting, blah, 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 or I was late to a presentation, or I was late to a field trip and I didn't get to go because I missed the bus, whatever. But since then, because I didn't want to miss out anymore, now I set reminders and I set alarms and blah, blah, blah. So again, you could pick something that is something that you've worked on, or are working on, but make sure it's just not vital to the position. Next, you can take something. Now, some people will say don't do this, but I've heard people say do this. Remember, these are just best practices, and you need to tailor this to make what makes the most sense for you. But my mentor who was a hiring manager for 40 years, helped me with this question. And he was like, take something that's not a weakness, but you're going to kind of spin it that makes it sound like it, but really it's not. So, what I do, and I answer this the same way every single time I have this question asked for me, but I always make it look like it's the first time I've heard it. That's the key too. You don't want to be super scripted. Like, oh, yep, my weakness is boom, boom, boom. My strengths are boom. This, that, you've got, it's a conversation, right? So I always make it seem like I'm thinking and I'm like, oh, that's a good question. I might even drink my water, like, Um, well, I guess I would say that my biggest weakness is that I tend to hold people up to the same high expectation that I hold myself up to. I sometimes get frustrated with people. I need to not hold people up to the same expectation that I hold myself up to. So I'm working on that. That's not a weakness. I'm saying I have high expectations for people. I'm saying that I expect greatness from people, right? That's not necessarily a weakness, but I'm like, I can get this, I can get frustrated with my team. So I'm definitely working on that, right? That's a great way to answer it. Another thing you can do is talk about communication because everybody, everywhere, every culture, every generation, every person on this planet can improve their communication. Even, I didn't even say that right, their communication. See, I need to work on it. Um, the best communicator in the world could do better. So that is something that we can always be working on. Like, you know, I don't know if it's necessarily like, a weakness, but I'm definitely could work on my communication skills. Learning how to communicate better, seeing people, seeing other people's point of view, putting myself in their shoes, understanding, how people communicate differently, however you want to talk about that. But to say that you are working on communication would be a great way to answer that question as well. All right, so those are some great ways to answer the weakness question. So tell me about yourself. What is your greatest strength? What is your greatest weakness? What are you can guarantee to be asked that. All right, next we're going to talk about all right, maybe where do you see yourself in 5 years from now? So this is another great one that you could potentially be asked. I've been asked this several times, but not every single interview, but a lot of times I get asked this question. So this is a balanced kind of response. You need to show your commitment so the employer knows that you'll be committed to the role for at least a year. Now, let me pause real fast. If you are using this position just as a stepping stone or to get your foot in the door or to get some experience, that's okay. Just don't say it. They don't want to know that. If they think that you're just using them, they are not going to hire you. I know I said in the last video, and I'll say it now, never lie, never falsify anything, but sometimes you might want to omit. So you need to show your commitment. But at the same time, you also want to demonstrate a logical plan or desire for growth. But you also want to avoid a response that's not aligned with the role. So the best and safest answer is to align to a logical progression to the needs of the position. So what I would like for you to do when you're thinking about answering this, all right, is your answer should reflect a commitment to the role and to the company. Show them your plan for the position and where you see yourself going in it. Show them how you'll do it and the resources that you're going to need along the way. And then tell them why these are your goals. So this is going to be a little bit more robust of an answer. So you definitely want to prepare ahead of time for this particular question. You don't want to tell them that your plan is to use this position as a stepping stone or to advance your career or anything like that, because then they're going to feel like you're just using them. All right. They need to see the value that you're bringing to them. Remember, they have a problem. You are the solution. If you're just using them for as a stepping stone, that's going to create another problem for them down the line because they're going to have to replace you. Don't give them an impossible or unrealistic 5-year plan, like, oh, I'm going to own this company. First of all, that's way too threatening. Also, is telling the interviewer that you want their job, even if you do. Again, don't say that because some people are very comfortable and happy with where they are and they don't want to move forward. They want to stay exactly where they are. And if you're sitting there with somebody who is of that mindset and you're like, oh, I'm going to be in your shoes or I want your job, they're going to be like, oh God, I'm not hiring this person. They're going to try to out me, like this, no. So even if it is, if you want to move forward, that's fine. You should demonstrate a growth mindset and that you want to continue to advance in the company and learn as much as you can and move up and all this kind of stuff. Now, some positions don't have that forward, upward mobility kind of progression plan. Education, for example, is one. If you get hired on as, a third grade teacher or an I'm sorry, or a middle school teacher or a high school teacher or something like that, you're a teacher. Now you get pay increases. Maybe you'll take on some extra responsibilities. Like, I mean, I took on running student government and I also was a swim coach. I did clubs and other stuff like that. So I was involved, but I was a teacher. You don't work as a teacher, for a couple of years and then become a dean and then become an assistant principal and then a principal, unless that's what you want to do. But those are jobs, those are completely different jobs. So you would have to be applying for those and getting the certain, either years under your belt or maybe more education and stuff like that, more advanced degrees, depending on the position. Now, in contrast to say someone, if you're going into HR, you might go into HR as an analyst or a generalist. I'm not really sure which one's first. Let's just say generalist is first. Maybe you'll go in as an HR generalist, and then the next logical progression is HR analyst, and then HR manager, and then director, so on and so forth. That's a different kind of position. Same with, accounting or finance. Maybe you'll start out as an associate advisor, and then you'll, move up to advisor, then maybe senior advisor and partner. So what you need to do is ask yourself, what is the natural progression for the type of work that you do? That's important for you to understand. What's the natural progression for the position you are applying for? All right. Now, here comes the beefy part. And this is just good to have goals, because if you don't have goals, how do you know that you've arrived, right? So, what I would like for you to do is pause the video and do this. Write down 3 to 5 of your short-term career goals. And that's once you get the position. So, think about you're working, you're out of school, you're working, or maybe you're going back to school and you're working and going to school. But what are some 3 to 5 of your short-term career goals? What do you see yourself doing over the next 1 to 2 years? So that's where you're going to get those career goals from. Ask yourself, why is this short-term goal important to me? You should know. All right, next you want to write down 3 to 5 of your long-term career goals. Ask yourself why this is important to me. So maybe 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. What are your long-term career goals? You might be sort of thinking like, I have no idea what I'll be doing, but if you did, what would it be? All right. Next, you want to put it all together. You want to pick out a short-term goal that resonates with you best for this position and combine it with a long-term goal that you feel really good about. Start your answer by describing your short-term goal and why that's important, followed by your long-term goal and why that's important. Employers should feel that you have actually put in some serious thought into this. They need to feel that you are as invested as they are. Because if they don't, if they feel like you're just applying because you just need a job, they're not going to hire you guys. All right, so some advice for answering this. Start with a short-term career goal for the position, then move into a long-term career goal and why. Why is it the direction that you want to move in? Don't just say it becomes difficult, or I'm sorry, if you don't say why, excuse me, if you don't say why, it becomes difficult to figure out if you're just spouting off meaningless answer or if your heart is really into it. So the why is important. These are your goals. So you should know why they're important to you. What are you trying to accomplish here? All right, so a nice framework for building this answer is, well, remember they say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, in the short term, I plan to work as a, and then whatever that position is, HR analyst, HR generalist, you know, finance associate, and focus on, and then why is that important? What are you trying to do? That's your short-term goal. Then as I progress in the role, I see myself working into what? What's your longer term career goal? And why is that important? You know, maybe you're in accounting and you're going to get your CPA. Talk about that. It's important that you know the natural progression. That's one of the most important things. So in the short term, I plan to work as a blank, you fill in the blank, and focus on blank. Then as I progress in this role, I see myself working into blank, where the blanks are the space holder for the title or the position, the type of work that you want to do. All right, so that's a good way to answer the where do you see yourself in 5 years. Now, the next two questions are going to go hand in hand with each other. Um, they're going to ask you, and I can guarantee you they're going to ask you again. If they don't ask you this, maybe your person doesn't know what they're doing, or they're rushing, or they're distracted, but they should ask you, why do you want to work here? Why? Out of all the companies, why this one? What is it about Raymond James or CPS or the Ag America Group or Enterprise Mobility, whatever? Like, what is it about this company that made you want to apply, or this position? Why do you want to work here? So this is where you're going to rely on your research. You looked up the company, you looked them up on LinkedIn, you're preparing for this interview, you're ready to go, all that kind of good stuff, right? Put it together in your answer. Why do you want to work here? Knock their socks off by your knowledge. Reference your notes. It's perfectly fine. Remember, we talked about in the last video that you're going to have a portfolio with you with all of your notes from your research. Take that with you to your interview. Look back on them, reference them. The whole time you're in the interview, you should have your notebook open and you're taking notes and you're referencing the notes you already took. So, what is it about them? What is their mission and vision? Where do they come from? Do they have products? If so, what? If they do, who are their competitors? Why are you applying for Nike over Adidas? Why are you going for, blue over red? So what is it about this company? What do they stand for? Um, do they do wonderful, great things in the community? And that speaks to your heart. If there's a personal connection, it's going to make it a deeper, more robust answer. So you have to tie your personality, your goals, and what you're trying to get out of it, your values and everything like that, to the position and the company so that they can feel like it lines up together. Why do you want to work here? Well, make them feel like this is the end all be all. This is the mothership. It has called you home. This is where you just can't wait to work here. Why? Give it I would just list one good, solid reason. You don't need to do a whole litany of reasons. Well, I want to work here because you do blah, 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 blah. They're not even going to latch on to anything. But if you can give one solid answer, back it up, why it resonates with you personally is going to be way more impactful than if you list off 10 different reasons. Now, some advice, don't tell them that you want to work there because you heard they pay well, or you get a lot of time off, or, you just need a job. I got to pay, got to pay my bills. That could very well be the case. That's just not going to go in your answer. It's not going to make a really impactful answer. Um, and then what's going to piggyback off of that question is going to be, why should we hire you? Why? Well, because you're the bomb.com. You bring all this value with you to this position. You are the obvious choice. You've already been selling yourself like that throughout the whole interview. So why should we hire you? Well, because I'm freaking amazing and I'm going to bring so much value to your team. So focus on the value that you bring, how you're solving that employer's problem more. You don't want to be like, oh, I'm going to learn this and my skills and me. That's talking about what you're going to get out of it. What is this company? What is this team? What is this person who's interviewing? What are they going to glean from you coming on board? What is the value that you bring on board so that they can see that you, again, are the obvious choice. You are the best candidate for this position. Okay. So focus on the value. Sorry, somebody just walked by my office and now I'm like, okay, what was I saying? Um, you want to focus. So why should we hire you? Why do you want to work here? And why should we hire you? Are going to kind of go hand in hand. Lean on the job description. Well, I know that you, need someone who does blah, 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 and I possess those skills. What is their problem? Remember, they have a problem. You're the solution. What is their problem? How have you solved that problem in the past for a previous employer? Or if you haven't had a previous employment, maybe an internship or a sports or clubs or volunteer experience or class projects. Stay away from personal um, stories if possible, like, well, me and my sister, blah, 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 or me and my besties, blah, blah, blah. It really should be something that's in some type of team setting so that they can visualize you in that position doing that for them. It's really impactful if you can address the problem that they have. Again, your research is going to come into play for that. Address the problem that they already have and how you are going to fix it, how you are the best candidate for this position. You possess these skills. This is the value. You're struggling with this. I can help you. All right. Easy peasy. It does definitely have to tie back to the job description and to the company's mission and vision. And that is how you're going to successfully answer that question. All right. They might ask you, why did you leave your last job? Just be honest. Just be honest. I usually say stuff like, I was looking for a better opportunity. One thing that you can never do, never do, this is a kiss of death. Do not start bad mouthing your previous employer. If you've never had a job, this answer is easy. You've never had a job. So they're not going to ask you that because they're going to have your resume, right? They might still ask it because they're not paying attention, but you just say, this is my first job. Um, but you are never going to go wrong with saying stuff like, I was looking for a better opportunity. I was looking for a better fit. I was looking for more advancement. I was looking for greater challenges, but tie it back to, again, the job. I was looking to advance and apply the skill set or learn more, from the company. And there was just no more learning opportunities. But just saying that I was looking for better opportunity is also going to be pretty good. They're not going to harp on this one, just like with the weakness question. I don't know if I touched on this. They're not going to be like, ooh, that's a good weakness. What else you got? No, they're asking the weakness question because someone told them they had to. In my opinion, it's the dumbest question. Some people love it, but from nobody that I've ever known in the history of hiring has ever like based their decision on whether to hire you or not off of the weakness question. They're going to off the other questions, but the weakness question is almost like they just feel like they have to ask that. And again, some people love it and they put a lot of stock into it. So just be prepared. But the same with this one. They're not going to be like, well, tell me more. Tell me more. What was it like working there? Blah, blah, blah. They're not going to do that. So you just quickly answer it. Why'd you leave your last job? And then move on. This does not need to be a big elaborate answer. You don't need a whole bunch of stories and examples to back this up. You can just simply be like, looking for better opportunity. All right. And the same if there's any blips in your work history or there's anything negative, just own it. Like if you were terminated, it's not a scarlet letter you have to wear around your chest for the rest of your life. You can just own it, never blame, never badmouth your previous employer, never badmouth your previous work environment. The moment you start doing that, they're going to start thinking that you're going to do the same to them. So don't do it. Don't do it. Don't badmouth. Even if it was the most horrible experience of your life, keep that inside. Shove that way down deep. Share that with your significant other, your family, your friend, your dog. But don't need to share that with your new potential future employer. All right. A behavioral question. You will know that you're getting ready to be asked a behavioral question if they say, tell me about a time. All right. Now get in your head the word star, STAR. You want to have a situation or task, the action that you specifically took, and the result. Now, situation or task, action, be specific on what you did, not the team. They're not hiring the team, they're hiring you individually. So don't focus on what the team collectively did. Focus on a specific story where you did something and you are the hero. Don't tell a story where you bumbled it or it flopped and didn't work out. You need to paint yourself as the hero of this story. Okay? Questions that ask you to talk about examples from your past work experience. This helps the interviewer to figure out, strengths and certain key competencies in areas that are required for the position. So they might ask you, tell me about a time you had to deal with a difficult customer. That you are going to get asked that if you're going into something for customer service. Tell me about a time you had a difficult colleague. Tell me about a time where maybe you made a mistake. It could be anything, but if they start with tell me about a time or anything along those lines, it's a behavior question. Start thinking STAR, situation, task, action, result. All right. 3 parts a skilled interview is looking for is the problem. Describe the problem in detail. Don't go into a minutia of detail where you're boring them, but describe it, the specific action you took, and the results, again, pointing yourself as the hero. Carefully listen to your interviewer and the question they are asking. Let them finish asking the question before you jump in and try to start answering it. You want to make sure that you are answering the question that is being asked, not what you think that they're asking. So just absorb it, listen very carefully, and make sure that you're answering the question they're actually asking. Carefully choose your language when answering their questions. Try to use their language. If it's a specific jargon for an industry, use that. Use that. All right. And before your interview, research words, terms, and jargon that might be useful. Choose examples from your past that you want to talk about, and focus on any follow-up questions. That be prepared for follow-up questions because they might be like, "Oh, that's very interesting. Tell me more." So be prepared. Your story should be elaborate enough that you are giving not only the situation, the task, the action, the result, but you're able to elaborate on that. Okay. The best way to answer this question is to talk about the most important part first. This strategy simply just applies to our human nature. We want to be gripped. We want to know what you're about to tell us, right? And then be strategic and follow the guidelines. Identify key competencies for the position. Look back at your work history and choose accomplishments that are relevant to the job you're applying for that fully demonstrate your skill. If you can talk about a problem that maybe that you might be faced with in this new position, if you've already had to deal with that in the past and how you've overcome it, that is a perfect example. If you can, try to make it as relatable to the position you're applying for as possible. Okay, and lastly, the last question that you are definitely going to get asked is, do you have any questions for us or for me, right? You can't say no. You can't say, nope, I'm good. You've answered all my questions. Always have questions left over. And we talked about this in the last video, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. But you have to have a couple questions that are not going to get asked throughout the interview. I gave several examples in the last video. Go back and reference that again. But you have to have, 2 or 3 questions because they are going to ask, do you have any questions for us? And if you're like, oh, I'm good, then that tells them that you're not interested. You didn't put forth any effort. Even you could really kill your interview at the very last minute by not having questions. They need you to have questions. They want you to have questions. So make sure that you have a couple that you can ask them and that you can continue that interview. Then they'll say, okay, after you've asked maybe 2 or 3 questions, anything else? And you can just be like, remember from last video, the very last question you're going to ask is, when do you think you'll be making a decision? And then go forward from there. All right, so those are the top interview questions that you can pretty much bank on being asked. There's going to be, of course, several ones that I can't cover because I don't know what all your interviewer is going to ask you, but you can bank on pretty much those questions being asked for sure. Um, but just do your research, especially if it's industry specific. Go on to big interview and practice answering questions from your specific industry. I showed you guys how to do that when we did the mock interview. Lots of resources for you guys. All right, I hope that was helpful. And so again, I'm assigning just the elevator pitch presentation that has to be recorded and emailed to me. Please do not read it. Practice it so that it flows. You're recording, you can do a couple takes, no big deal. Don't forget about the employability skills series too. You're still required to watch 5 of those videos from that link I shared with you, and then write a quick reflection on those 5 videos. We are rapidly wrapping this up, guys. We have this week and next week, and then we are done. Again, classes end on June 18th. So make sure that if you have any questions, let me know. Happy to answer anything. Please get your assignments in. Make sure they're in before the deadline so you're not getting dinged any late point penalties. All right, guys. Have a great rest of your Monday. I hope it's fabulous. And we'll talk soon. Bye.